The great bruised eye of Helion 4 stared through the reinforced ferroglass of the spindle vista, a swirling hurricane of violent orange and sickly purple gas that spanned 40,000 kilometers. Against that backdrop of atmospheric violence, the neon reflection of the Spindle Vista restaurant looked trivial, like a smear of cheap lipstick on the face of a god. Adrian Cole swirled the amber liquid in his glass. The ice had melted 20 minutes ago, diluting the synthetic whiskey into something that tasted like copper and regret. He checked his wristcom again. 1900 hours and 12 minutes. "She is not coming, soldier," the bartender said. He was a Tellarite with tusks that had been capped in gold, wiping down the counter with a rag that was arguably dirtier than the surface it was cleaning. Statistically speaking, if they are more than 15 minutes late in the spindle, they are already on a transport pod to the lower sectors with someone richer. Adrian let out a short, dry laugh that did not reach his eyes. He looked at his reflection in the glass behind the bar. A middle-aged human face stared back, lined with the gray fatigue that came from 20 years of breathing recycled air. His hair was cut short, a habit from the swarm war that he could not shake, and his jacket was a standard-issue maintenance tech gray, patched at the elbows. He looked exactly like what he was, a man who spent his days crawling inside the ventilation shafts of a glorious orbital habitat, scrubbing carbon filters so the rich executives of Heliodyne could breathe easy. "My buddy swore this one was different," Adrian said, his voice gravelly. "Said she likes men with steady hands." "You fix air recyclers," the bartender grunted. "Your hands smell like ozone and solvent." The wristcom buzzed against Adrian's pulse. It was a single sharp vibration. He lifted his wrist. The holographic text hovered in the air, glowing a soft, apologetic blue. One text. "I'm not coming. Something came up. Sorry." Adrian stared at the words. He did not feel anger. That was the worst part. He felt a hollow, sinking confirmation, the sound of a heavy door clicking shut in a long, empty hallway. He had prepared himself for this. He had showered, shaved with a razor that actually cost credits, and put on his best shirt, all while a quiet voice in the back of his head whispered that it was a waste of time. "Well?" the bartender asked. "Something came up," Adrian said. He tapped the screen to dismiss the message. "Something always comes up." Another round. Adrian looked at the bill tab open on his screen. He had enough credits for one more, or he could save it to buy a real protein pack for breakfast instead of the nutrient paste the company dispensed. "No," Adrian said, pushing the glass away. "Close me out. I think I will just sit here for a minute and enjoy the view of the storm before I go back to my coffin." He turned his chair around to face the room. The Spindle Vista was a mid-tier establishment, the kind of place where middle management types from Heliodyne came to feel sophisticated without spending executive-level money. The air smelled of seared spices and ozone. Waiter drones hovered silently between tables, carrying trays of glowing cocktails. That was when he saw them. They were sitting at a small, round table in the far corner, tucked away near a decorative pillar, wrapped in fake ivy. A family of 3. They were Volari. The fox-like species were common enough on the Oriole, ring usually seen scurrying through the service corridors or hauling cargo in the docks. But seeing them in the Spindle Vista was rare. The mother of Vixen, with russet fur that gleamed under the harsh track lighting, sat with a posture that was too rigid. Her large, triangular ears swiveled constantly, tracking the noise of the room like radar dishes. She wore a simple tunic, clean, but threadbare, the fabric washed so many times it had lost its original color. Beside her sat 2 kits. The boy, maybe 10 years old in human terms, had fur the color of burnt umber and eyes that watched the room with a mixture of wonder and defensiveness. The girl was younger, smaller, with cream-colored patches on her ears. What caught Adrian's attention was not their species, but their table. They had ordered a single bowl of soup and a basket of bread rolls. Just one. Adrian watched as the mother, the vixen, took a bread roll, tore it into 3 precise, equal pieces, and placed one in front of each child. She dipped her own small piece into the broth, letting it soak up the liquid to make it filling before eating it with slow, deliberate bites. She was not eating dinner. She was performing a magic trick, trying to stretch a snack into a meal for 3. Her eyes flicked to the holographic menu hovering above the center of the table. Adrian could see the reflection of the prices in her dark irises. She flinched slightly every time the number scrolled. She was calculating, counting every credit. Adrian felt a familiar ache in his chest. He knew that look. He had seen it in the refugee camps on Sigma 9, after the swarm had glassed the colonies. It was the look of a parent realizing that love was not a currency that could buy calories. He began to stand up, intending to leave to spare himself the sight of their struggle. It was easier to be alone in his quarters than to witness dignity fighting a losing battle against poverty. But then, the shadow fell over their table. A man in the dark blue and silver armor of Heliodyne private security stepped out from the crowd. He did not look like the station police. Station police were tired and overworked. This man was sleek, well-fed, and carried himself with the arrogance of someone whose authority was purchased, not earned. Adrian froze. He sat back down, his body turning slightly, so his shoulders shielded his face, but his eyes remained locked on the corner table. The security officer did not pull up a chair. He stood over them, invading their personal space, blocking the light. He rested one hand on his belt right next to the shock baton. Adrian could not hear the words at first, but he saw the reaction. The kids' ears flattened against their skulls. The little girl, the one with cream ears, shrank inward, trying to make herself invisible. The boy glared at the table, his small claws digging into the synthetic tablecloth. The mother, however, did not shrink. She stiffened. Her chin lifted, exposing her throat, a gesture of submission in some cultures, but defiance in hers. Adrian tapped a sequence on his wristcom, adjusting the audio pickup on his earpiece. It was a trick he used when diagnosing groaning pipes in the walls, but it worked just as well for eavesdropping across a crowded room. The audio crackled, then cleared. Grace period is over, Ms. Velis," the guard was saying. His voice was smooth, oily. "Director Morrow has been very patient with the resettlement waves, but the interest on your transit fees is compounding hourly." "I paid the installment," the vixen, Naira Velis, said. Her voice was melodic but trembling with suppressed strain. "I transferred 60 credits this morning. That is half my weekly wage." 60 covers the administrative processing fee for the payment," the guard replied, leaning closer. He picked up one of the remaining bread rolls, examined it with mock curiosity, and dropped it back onto the table. It landed with a dry thud. "It does not touch the principal debt. You are still 3,000 credits in the hole for the relocation tickets." "We cannot pay what we do not have," Naira whispered. "I am working double shifts at the traffic control center. Please, just give me until the next cycle." "There is another way," the guard said. The tone of his voice shifted, becoming lower, more predatory. "The employment bond office is looking for younger candidates. Flexible hours. Light industrial work. The boy is what 10 cycles. He has nimble fingers. We could sign over a percentage of his future labor value. It would lower your interest rate immediately." Adrian felt the air in his lungs turn to ice. Future labor value. They were talking about selling the child into indentured servitude before he had even grown his adult fur. The boy, Kiro, looked up, terror flashing in his eyes. Naira moved instantly, her hand covering the boy's arm, pulling him slightly behind her. "No," she said. "My children are not part of the contract." "Everyone is part of the contract, Ms. Velis," the guard sighed, acting as if her resistance was a boring inconvenience. "You are on Heliodyne property, breathing Heliodyne air. You pay with credits or you pay with service. I will give you 24 hours to consider the restructuring. Otherwise, we might have to revoke your residency permit." And you know what happens to vagrants outside the airlock? Adrian sat motionless. Inside his mind, a switch flicked. It was a switch that had been rusted shut for 10 years, welded down by trauma and whiskey, and the desire to just fade away. But the mention of selling a child, the casual cruelty of the threat, shattered the rust. His eyes changed. The weariness vanished, replaced by a cold, geometric precision. He was no longer Adrian Cole, the janitor of air ducts. He was Sergeant Cole of the 7th Deep Recon. He scanned the room. Target 1 security officer. Male. Roughly 190 pounds. Right-handed, his hand kept drifting to the baton on his right hip. Environment crowded. Witnesses everywhere. Cameras in the ceiling corners. Violence was not an option. If he threw a punch, he would be arrested and the Valari family would be deported instantly. Asset information. The guard was bullying, which meant he was likely operating in the gray zone of company policy. He was squeezing them, probably for a commission on the debt restructuring. Adrian analyzed the distance. 20 feet. He could walk away. He had walked away 100 times before. He had walked away when the company cut pensions. He had walked away when they rationed the water. It was safer to be invisible. But then he looked at the little girl Sori. She was trembling, holding a piece of bread like it was the only anchor keeping her from drifting into space. "I'm not coming," the text had said. Fine, Adrian thought. If my date isn't coming, then I am free to dine with whoever the hell I want. He stood up. He grabbed his half-empty glass of whiskey. He did not rush. He moved with the loose, confident stride of a man who owned the floorboards beneath his boots. He approached the corner table. The guard was looming over Naira, opening his mouth to deliver another threat. Adrian hooked his foot around an empty chair from a nearby table, dragged it over, and slammed it down right next to the guard, startling the man into taking a step back. Adrian sat down, planted his elbows on the table, and beamed a radiant, utterly fake smile at the terrified vixen. "Naira." Adrian boomed his voice, projecting enough to turn heads, 3 tables away. "I am so sorry I am late. You would not believe the traffic in the maglev tubes. Some idiot jammed a cargo drone in the primary shaft." The table went silent. Naira stared at him, her mouth slightly open, revealing sharp white teeth. Her ears were swiveling frantically, trying to process this new variable. The children looked at him as if he had just descended from the ceiling. The security guard blinked, his rhythm broken. "Excuse me, who are you?" Adrian ignored the guard entirely. He reached across the table and picked up the bread basket, offering it to the boy. "Go on, kid. Don't wait for me." Then he turned his gaze slowly, lazily to the guard. "I am the guy who was supposed to be here 10 minutes ago," Adrian said. He took a sip of his whiskey. "And you are standing in my light." "This is a private matter." The guard snapped his hand, twitching toward his belt again. "Official Heliodyne business. Move along, citizen." Adrian leaned back the chair, creaking under his weight. He looked the guard up and down, letting his eyes linger contemptuously on the man's polished boots. "Official business?" Adrian raised an eyebrow. "Funny. I did not see a case file number on your display. And I know for a fact that Section 42 of the Station Residency Act prohibits debt collection activities in dining establishments during service hours. It is considered harassment of patrons." The guard stiffened. "I am not harassing anyone. I am explaining the terms of you are soliciting a minor for a labor contract." Adrian cut him off. His voice dropped an octave. It was no longer loud. It was a low rumble, the sound of a tank engine idling. "I heard you." And so did the ambient microphone on the surveillance node, right above your head. Adrian pointed a calloused finger at the black glass bubble in the ceiling. It was a bluff. He knew that camera had been broken for 3 weeks because he was the one scheduled to fix it next Tuesday. But the guard did not know that. "Now," Adrian continued, his eyes hard as flint, "my friend Naira and I were about to discuss a separate financial arrangement. One involving a transfer of credits from my account to hers, which would make your restructuring offer redundant. Would it not? The guard's eyes darted from Adrian to the camera, then to Nira. He saw a human male, worn but clearly military grade, claiming a connection to the target. He calculated the risk. Squeezing a helpless refugee was easy. Squeezing a veteran with knowledge of station bylaws and an attitude problem was paperwork he did not want. "You have 24 hours, Velis," the guard hissed at Nira, trying to salvage his pride. "If the account is not green by tomorrow rotation," he let the threat hang, glared at Adrian, and turned on his heel, marching away into the crowd. The silence that followed was deafening. Adrian exhaled the tension leaving his shoulders. He took another drink of his whiskey, draining the glass. When he looked back at the family, 3 pairs of golden vertical pupil eyes were staring at him. "Who are you?" Kiro, the boy asked. His voice was a high-pitched growl, trying to be brave. "Kiro, hush," Nira said softly. She looked at Adrian, her expression a complex map of relief, suspicion, and confusion. "Why did you do that? He will come back. And he will be angrier." "He is a bully," Adrian said, setting his glass down. "Bullies hate an audience, and he won't come back tonight." "You said financial arrangement," Nira said, her ears twitching nervously. "I cannot pay you. I have nothing. If you think you can buy what he wanted to take—" Adrian laughed softly, raising his hands in surrender. "Whoa. Easy. No. That was a lie. I lie very well. It is one of my few talents, right next to fixing clogged toilets and sleeping through alarms." He looked at the meager bowl of soup on the table, which had gone cold. "I am Adrian," he said. "I work in maintenance, Sector 7. "Nira," she replied hesitantly. "This is Kiro. And sorry." "Sorry," the little girl peeked out from behind her mother's arm. "Are you a soldier?" she squeaked. "I used to be," Adrian said. "A long time ago. Now I am just a guy whose date stood him up." "Stood him up." Nira tilted her head, the concept perhaps not translating perfectly. "She decided not to come," Adrian explained. "Send me a text. One text. 'I'm not coming.' Left me sitting here with a clean shirt and a full wallet." Nira looked down at the table. "I am sorry. That is cruel." "It happens," Adrian shrugged. "But here is the problem. I have reserved this time. I am hungry. And I really hate eating alone. It makes me look pathetic." He leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand. "I would consider it a personal favor if you would help me solve this problem. Join me for dinner, my treat. If I go home with all these credits in my account, I might do something stupid, like buy a robotic cat, and I really don't want a robotic cat." Nira stared at him. He could see the war inside her. The Volari were a proud people. Their planet had been a matriarchy of hunters and weavers before the corporations came and cracked the crust for minerals. Taking charity was like swallowing glass for her. But then her stomach gave a traitorous, audible growl. And Kiro looked at the digital menu again, his eyes lingering on a picture of a grilled avian platter. "You are offering to pay for our meal," Nira said slowly, testing the words. "Because your date was canceled." "Exactly. I am already budgeting for 2 people. Maybe 3.5, he winked at Sori. "You would be saving me from wasting money on, I don't know, gambling." Nira looked at her children. She saw the hollows in their cheeks. She looked back at Adrian, searching his face for deceit, for that gleam of expectation that most men on the station had. She found only exhaustion and a strange, sad kindness. "Okay," Nira whispered. She smoothed the fur on her arms. "But only because you need help avoiding a robotic cat." Adrian grinned. It was a real smile this time. "Deal." He signaled the drone waiter. "Menu, full access, and bring 3 chocolate milks, large." As the kids gasped, Kiro's jaw actually dropped. Adrian watched Nira relax, her shoulders slumping as the immediate threat of hunger receded. She shifted in her chair, and the movement caused the collar of her tunic to slip slightly. Beneath it, around her neck, was a thin, metallic band. A tracker. The mark of the refugee debt program. But it was not the band that made Adrian's blood run cold. It was the medallion attached to the collar of the children. It was a small, hexagonal tag, stamped with a barcode and a logo. A stylized hawk, gripping a lightning bolt. Adrian knew that logo. He had not seen it in 12 years, not since the incident in the Gera Nebula. It was the insignia of the Epsilon Logistics Corps, the unit that was supposed to extract his squad, the unit that never came, the unit that Heliodyne claimed had been disbanded due to budget cuts. 2 days before his team was slaughtered on the ground. Adrian stared at the tag swinging from Sori's neck as she wiggled in excitement over the chocolate milk. That tag meant these children were not just refugees. They were assets being managed by the ghost of the very organization that had left him and his brothers to die in the mud. The coincidence was impossible, which meant it wasn't a coincidence. The steak he was about to order suddenly felt less like a meal and more like fuel. He was going to need it. "Are you okay, Mr. Adrian?" Sori asked, her large ears perking up. "You look like you saw a ghost." Adrian blinked, forcing the memories back into their box. He looked at the little girl at the debt collar around her neck that bore the mark of his betrayers. "No ghosts, kid," Adrian said softly. He picked up the menu. "I just realized I am hungrier than I thought." He looked at Naira. "Order whatever you want. Do not look at the price. Tonight, the company is paying." He did not mention that the company was going to pay for a lot more than just dinner. He did not know how yet, and he did not have a plan. But as he looked at the fear lingering in Naira's eyes and the corporate tag on her daughter's neck, Adrian Cole realized his blind date had not been a failure after all. It was a deployment. "I recommend the roasted solar fin," Adrian said, pointing at the menu. "And for dessert, I hear the nebula cake is big enough to hide in." Nira laughed, a soft barking sound that was the most beautiful thing Adrian had heard in years. "Then we will take 2, she said. Adrian smiled, but his hand under the table formed a fist. The Fox family was eating with him now, and nobody interrupted his dinner twice. The routine of the Oriole Ring was a grinding metallic rhythm that usually chewed people up and spat them out. But for Adrian Cole, the rhythm had acquired a new, syncopated beat. It was no longer just waking up, checking oxygen scrubbers, eating pasta, and sleeping. Now there was a variable. The variable met him at 1900 hours in the food court, specifically at the table, with the wobbly leg near the ventilation intake. It had been 2 weeks since the incident with the security guard. 2 weeks of Adrian accidentally finding himself hungry at the exact same time Naira Velis and her kits were finishing their day. He had become a fixture at their table, a gray-clad human monolith, sitting amidst 3 bright-eyed, russet-furred Valari. "So," Kiro said, holding a plastic fork like a weapon. The boy was 10 years old and possessed the intense, skepticism-fueled curiosity of a scientist. "You are telling me humans cannot move their ears at all, not even a little bit?" Adrian paused a spoonful of synthetic stew halfway to his mouth. He looked at Kiro, then at Sori, who was wiggling her cream-tipped ears, independently of each other, just to show off. "No," Adrian said gravely. "They are bolted to the side of our heads. Structural integrity. If they moved, our sunglasses would fall off." Sori giggled, covering her muzzle with paws that were stained with berry juice. Naira, sitting across from him, shook her head. Through the corners of her mouth were fighting a losing battle against a smile. "Do not listen to him, Kiro," Naira said, her voice carrying that melodic, slightly vibrating quality unique to her species. "Humans simply evolved to hunt, with their eyes, not their hearing. They are visual predators. That is why they stare so much." I do not stare, Adrian protested, though he had been caught watching the way the harsh station lights caught the gold flecks in Naira's fur just moments before. You are staring at my fries right now, Naira countered, sliding her tray a protective inch closer to her. Strategic observation, Adrian corrected. I am assessing the structural weakness of that potato wedge. It was easy. That was what scared him. It was terrifyingly easy to slip into this dynamic, to pretend that he was just a man sharing a meal with a friend and her children, and not a broken veteran hiding from his own history. The warmth of the table was a physical sensation, a stark contrast to the cold, recycled draft of his quarters. But beneath the banter, the reality of the aureole ring was always waiting. Naira looked tired. The fur around her eyes was slightly matted, and her tail, usually a barometer of her mood, lay still and heavy around the chair leg. She was working double shifts at the civilian air traffic control tower, guiding heavy freighters into the erratic gravity well of Helion 4. How was the traffic today? Adrian asked, dropping the humor. Heavy, Naira sighed. 3 ore haulers from the lower belts came in with damaged stabilizers. The atmospheric turbulence is getting worse. And the supervisors. She stopped, glancing at the children. The supervisors are very particular about efficiency metrics this week. Adrian knew what that meant. Efficiency metrics was corporate code for finding reasons to dock pay or add penalties to the debt contracts. They are squeezing the traffic controllers, Adrian asked, keeping his voice low. They are squeezing everyone who has a residency bond, Naira murmured, picking at her food. There is a rumor that the quotas are going up again. If I do not hit the bonus tier next month, the interest on the debt will outpace my salary. I will be working for negative credits. She looked at Kiro and Sori, who were now arguing over the physics of a straw. I just need to get them to the orbital transfer station, she whispered, almost to herself. If I can clear the debt, we can get a ticket to the agricultural colonies in the rim. There is real sky there. Soil, not just metal and glass. Adrian looked at the collar around her neck. The faint blinking light of the debt tracker was a constant reminder that she was not a citizen. She was an investment asset of Heliodyne. We will figure it out, Adrian said. It was a dangerous promise, one he had no right to make, but the words tumbled out before he could stop them. Naira looked at him, her golden eyes searching his face. You have already paid for dinner 6 times, Adrian. You cannot fix an entire economic system with free stew. Watch me, he said. I am very good at fixing broken systems, or at least breaking them further until they have to be replaced. The next day, Adrian was knee-deep in a sub-access tunnel on level 42, replacing a corroded filtration unit. The air down here tasted like ozone and old grease. It was the bowels of the station where the pristine facade of the upper levels gave way to the ugly machinery that kept everyone alive. He tapped his interface tool against the data port of the wall terminal. He was supposed to be running a diagnostic on the airflow, but his mind was still on Naira's debt, efficiency metrics, quotas. On a whim, Adrian keyed in a bypass code. It was an old military decryption key, a relic from the Swarm War. Most modern systems would have flagged it instantly, but Heliodyne was cheap. They built their infrastructure on top of old military surplus servers to save money. The code slid through the firewall like a hot knife through butter. He pulled up the public logs for the Refugee Integration and Employment Program. The face of Director Helena Morrow smiled back at him from a newsfeed archive. She was a striking woman human, with hair the color of polished steel and a smile that looked like it had been focus grouped to maximize trust while minimizing empathy. We are not just providing jobs, the holographic recording of Morrow said, her voice smooth and cultured. We are providing a purpose. The employment bond is a pathway to citizenship, a helping hand for those displaced by the tragic resource conflicts of the Outer Rim. Adrian snorted. He minimized the speech and started digging into the raw data files attached to the program. He was looking for anomalies. He found them almost immediately. The turnover rate for Volari workers in the light industrial sector was 50% higher than any other demographic. The files were riddled with status codes. Contract terminated. Medical contract terminated. Absenteeism. And the chillingly frequent contract suspended. Transfer to secure facility. Transfer to where? Adrian muttered. He cross-referenced the names of the transferred workers with the station's medical logs. Nothing. No hospital admissions. He checked the morgue records. Nothing. Hundreds of Volari were vanishing from the workforce, their debts marked as defaulted, and then silence. He brought up the energy grid schematics for the industrial sector. As a maintenance tech, Adrian knew the heartbeat of the station better than the architects did. He knew that a hydroponics bay drew power in a steady wave, while a smelter drew it in jagged spikes. He found a ghost load. There was a massive power draw coming from Sector 89, a section of the ring that was officially listed as decommissioned storage. The power signature was steady heavy and running 24 hours a day. It was drawing enough juice to run high-grade atmospheric stabilizers and heavy manufacturing equipment. But the official map said it was an empty warehouse, and the power line feeding it. It was spliced directly from the main conduit, bypassing the meters. Someone was hiding a factory, or a prison. Adrian downloaded the energy logs, his heart hammering against his ribs. He felt the old instinct, the spider sense that had kept him alive on the mud planets of the Swarm War. He was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down into a dark pit. If he pursued this, he would declare war on Heliodyne. He was declaring war on the people who owned the air he breathed. He thought of his unit. He thought of the silence in the comms channel, right before the artillery hit. He had promised himself he would never be a pawn again. He had promised to keep his head down, survive, and die of old age in a warm bed. Then he thought of Sori wiggling her ears. He thought of Cairo asking if humans were blind. He thought of Nira dividing a bread roll into 3 equal pieces. "Damn it," Adrian whispered to the humming machinery. "I am going to get myself killed." He saved the data to a secure encrypted partition on his wristcom and closed the panel. 3 days later, the tension of the discovery was eating him alive, but he had to maintain his cover. That meant doing exactly what a lonely middle-aged maintenance tech would do, spending his day off with his friends. They went to the Hydro Garden, one of the few places on Oriole Ring where you could see something green that wasn't moldy. It was a towering atrium filled with tanks of bioluminescent algae and genetically modified fish from a dozen worlds. The light was soft and blue, casting rippling shadows on the floor. Sori was pressed against the glass of a massive tank, staring at a school of neon-striped eels. "Look," she squealed, pointing. "That one swims like a corkscrew fighter." Adrian chuckled. "You know what a corkscrew fighter is. Mom showed me diagrams," Sori said proudly. "She said she used to fly a scout class, but she could outmaneuver the fighters because they were too heavy." Nira smiled, but it was a fragile thing. She was walking beside Adrian, her arms crossed. She was wearing a scarf today, likely to hide the blinking light of the collar. But Adrian knew it was there. "She has the spirit of a pilot," Nira said softly. "I worry she will want to fly before she learns to walk properly." "It is in the blood," Adrian said. "My grandfather was a pilot. He flew atmospheric dust croppers. Said the only time he felt free was when he was 3,000 feet up." Nira looked at him. "And you, where do you feel free, Adrian?" The question caught him off guard. He looked at the fish swimming in their endless glass-walled circle. "I don't know," he admitted. "I haven't felt free since before the war. Maybe not even then. The military owns you. Then the corporation owns you. You trade one uniform for another." "But you chose to sit with us," Nira said. She stopped walking and turned to face him. The blue light made her fur look silver. You could have walked away that first night. You could be sitting in a quiet room, saving your credits. Why are you here, carrying Sori's backpack and buying us tickets to look at fish? Adrian looked at the backpack slung over his shoulder. It was pink and covered in stickers. Because, Adrian said, his voice rough, I spent 10 years watching good people die for bad reasons. I got tired of it. I guess I wanted to see good people live for a change. Nira's eyes softened. She reached out her hand, hovering for a moment before she lightly touched his forearm. Her claws were retracted, her pads warm against his skin. You are a strange human, Adrian Cole, she said. You act like a stone, but you crumble like old bread. Careful, Adrian grinned crookedly. You will ruin my reputation as a grumpy hermit. Your reputation is safe with me, she said. For a moment, the station, the debt, and the looming threat of Morrow faded. There was just the blue light, the hum of the water pumps, and the feeling of her hand on his arm. Then, the illusion shattered. Adrian's eyes, trained to constantly scan the perimeter, caught movement in the reflection of the glass tank. 50 feet back, near the entrance of the garden, a man was watching them. He was not wearing a security uniform. He was wearing civilian clothes, a dark jacket and slacks, but he stood with the rigidity of a soldier. He was speaking into his collar. Adrian shifted his body, placing himself subtly between Nira and the line of sight. Nira, he said, his voice dropping to a casual conversational volume that belied the urgency of his words. Don't look now, but we have an admirer. Nira's ears swiveled instantly. She stiffened. Where? 6 o'clock. Gray jacket. Do not turn around. Do not. Is it security? Worse, Adrian said. Security wears uniforms to scare you. Plainclothes means they are gathering intelligence. They are building a file. He saw Kiro and Sori running back toward them, laughing. Gather the kids, Adrian said. We are leaving. Casual pace. We are just a boring family going home for nap time. As they walked toward the exit, Adrian locked eyes with the man in the gray jacket. He did not blink. He let the man know he had been seen. The watcher did not flinch, but he did not follow them out. He just stood there, a silent sentinel of the system. That evening, Adrian decided he was done waiting. He could not punch a system, but he could try to navigate it. He sat in the cramped living area of his quarters, surrounded by holographic displays of the station bylaws and the interspecies rights accord. He spent 6 hours drafting a formal complaint regarding the interest rates on Nira's debt. He cited 14 different precedents, including the Predatory Lending Prohibition Act of Sector 4 and the Refugee Protection Clause. He used his old military clearance codes to fast-track the document directly to the Heliodyne Oversight Committee. It was a beautifully crafted piece of legal warfare. It was airtight. He hit send at 0200 hours. The rejection came back at 0203 minutes. Subject case 99 Alpha Velis. Status rejected reason. Claimant lacks localized biometric signature on file for document 7B. Furthermore, the interest rates cited fall within the high-risk asset management parameters agreed upon by the signee. Note: further frivolous filings will result in a penalty fee charged to the signee's account. 3 minutes. No human had read it. An algorithm had scanned it, flagged it, and spat it back out. High-risk asset management, Adrian read aloud, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. They are not people to you. They are just inventory. He slammed his fist onto the metal desk, denting the surface. The pain was grounding. It cleared the red mist from his vision. The legal route was dead. The front door was locked, barred, and rigged with explosives. Fine, Adrian said to the empty room. If you won't let me use the door, I will come through the floorboards. He pulled up the encrypted data he had stolen from the subgrid. He needed more than just power spikes. He needed a smoking gun. He needed to know exactly what was happening in Sector 89. He began to cross-reference the logistical supply manifests with the energy spikes. He noticed a pattern in the deliveries to the station. Every Tuesday and Thursday, a heavy freighter from the outer belt docked at Bay 4. The manifest always listed the cargo as raw silicates or industrial lubricant, but the weight distribution was wrong. Adrian had unloaded enough dropships to know that liquid cargo shifted. Solid ore sat heavy. The telemetry data from the docking clamps showed that the cargo containers from these specific ships were perfectly balanced with active internal climate control. You don't climate control raw ore. You climate control biologicals. He dug deeper into the metadata of the transport ships. He stripped away the shell companies, the leasing agreements, the false flags. The ships were registered to a subsidiary called Epsilon Prime. The logo associated with the registry was a hawk gripping a lightning bolt. Adrian froze. His breath hitched in his throat. He knew that logo. He had seen it on the tags around Kiro and Sori's necks. He had seen it on the side of the dropship that was supposed to evacuate his squad from the mudhell of Gara 7, Epsilon Logistics. But it went deeper. He traced the specific transponder code of the ship currently docked at Bay 4, the Void Runner. He ran a search for that transponder code in his personal archives, the illegal backup of his unit's operational history he had kept for 20 years. The screen flashed red. Match. Found. The Void Runner used to be the UNS Purgatory. It was the medical frigate that had been stationed in orbit above Gara 7. The ship that had signaled it was full and couldn't take on the wounded. The ship that had warped out of the system, leaving Adrian and 40 men to be overrun by the swarm. Heliodyne hadn't just bought the surplus ships, they had bought the entire operation. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The betrayal of his unit wasn't just incompetence or cowardice. It was profitable. They hadn't left his unit to die because they were overwhelmed. They had left them to die to cover up the fact that the medical frigate wasn't carrying wounded soldiers. It was likely carrying something else, something valuable enough to sacrifice a platoon for. And now, 20 years later, that same fleet was being used to traffic Volari refugees into a black site factory in Sector 89. Nero wasn't just a victim of a bad loan. She was caught in the gears of the same machine that had chewed up Adrian's life. The wristcom on his desk buzzed. It was a message from Naira. Naira. The camera outside our door is broken again, and someone painted a symbol on our door, a red circle with a line through it. The kids are scared, Adrian. I don't know what to do. Adrian stared at the message. Then he looked at the logo of the hawk and lightning bolt. The fear was gone. The hesitation was gone. He was not a maintenance tech anymore. He was not a lonely man looking for a family. He was the last surviving member of the 7th Deep Recon, and he had just found the enemy. He typed a reply to Naira. Adrian locked the door. Keep the kids away from the windows. I am coming over, and I am bringing my toolkit. He stood up and walked to the small locker at the foot of his bed. He keyed in a combination he hadn't used in years. The lock clicked open. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was not a wrench or a scanner. It was a kinetic pulse pistol, stripped down and illegal in 12 systems, and a data spike capable of frying a corporate server from the inside out. No more blind dates, Adrian whispered. He grabbed the gear. The Fox family was not going to pay another credit, not while he was breathing. The air in the civilian residential sector smelled of recycled ozone and desperation. It was a smell Adrian knew well, but tonight it was laced with something sharper fear. He was too late. By the time he reached Naira's corridor, the show was already over. The heavy blast door to her unit was forced open, the locking mechanism twisted metal. A crowd of Volari neighbors stood in the hallway. Their ears flattened, their tails tucked between their legs. They were silent, the heavy silence of prey that knows the predator is still nearby. In the center of the hallway, Director Morrow's personal enforcement squad held the perimeter. Nira was on her knees, Her hands were cuffed behind her back with magnetic restraints that hummed with a sickly blue light. She was not crying. Her head was high, her eyes burning with a cold, furious fire. But Adrian could see the tremor in her shoulders. Kiro and Sori were huddled against the wall, held back by a security drone that hovered at eye level, its stun prod crackling. Kiro was trying to shield his sister, baring his small teeth in a growl that was heartbreakingly futile. Citizen Nira Velis, a faceless, helmeted officer, announced, his voice amplified to rattle the teeth of everyone in the corridor. You are under arrest for sabotage of critical station infrastructure, specifically the falsification of flight logs, resulting in a Class 3 navigational hazard. That is a lie, Nira shouted, her voice cracking. I reported the hazard. The logs prove I diverted the ship. The logs have been reviewed by Director Morrow herself, the officer droned. They show intentional negligence. You are a danger to the safety of the Oriole Ring. Adrian stepped forward. He didn't mean to. His body just moved, driven by a kinetic memory of protecting the weak. Hey, he shouted. 3 rifles snapped towards him instantly. Step back, citizen, the lead officer barked. This is a restricted operation. She is innocent, Adrian said, raising his hands, slowly palms open. I work in maintenance. I can pull the raw server data. You are looking at a mirrored cache, not the live feed. Let me show you. Adrian Cole, the officer said. The recognition was instant. We have orders regarding you. Interference will be construed as complicity in the sabotage ring. Stand down or join her. Adrian looked at Nira. Her eyes widened. She shook her head violently. Don't, she mouthed. Think of the children. If he fought now, here in this narrow hallway, people would die. Kiro and Sori would be caught in the crossfire. He froze. The impotence tasted like ash in his mouth. He had to watch as they hauled her up. He had to watch as Sori screamed for her mother, a high keening sound that sliced through Adrian's heart. He had to watch the airlock of the transport skiff hiss shut, swallowing the woman who had taught him how to enjoy dinner again. Take the children to Child Protective Services, the officer ordered. Process them for the foster labor program. No, Adrian said. His voice was low, dangerous. The children stay. The officer paused, looking at the hulking figure of the veteran. He weighed the paperwork of shooting a decorated, albeit washed-up human soldier against the minor directive of seizing 2 alien brats. You want custody, janitor? The officer sneered. Fine. You have 24 hours to file the guardianship bond before we come back. Save us the paperwork. The squad marched out. The drone deactivated and fell silent. The hallway emptied. The neighbors retreated behind their doors, terrified of guilt by association. Adrian stood alone with 2 sobbing fox kits. He knelt down. Sori launched herself into his chest, burying her face in his grease-stained jacket. Kiro stood stiffly, tears streaming down his fur fists clenched. They took her, Kiro whispered. They said she broke the station. She didn't break anything, kid, Adrian said, his voice steady as granite. But we are going to. He took them to his quarters. It was a violation of his lease, a violation of station protocol, and probably a dozen other laws, but Adrian was done with laws. He settled them on his narrow bunk with the last of the chocolate milk and a blanket he had stolen from the officers' mess 3 years ago. I have to go out, Adrian told Kiro. I need you to lock this door from the inside. Do not open it for anyone but me, not even if they have a badge, especially if they have a badge. Where are you going? Kiro asked, his voice small. To work, Adrian said. He went to the bathroom, locked the door, and looked at himself in the mirror. He looked old, tired, but his eyes were clear. He reached into his mouth to the very back molar on the left side. He pressed his tongue against it in a specific sequence, long, short, long. The tooth clicked. It was a false cap. He spat it into his palm. Inside the hollow ceramic shell was a microchip no bigger than a grain of rice. It was a neural interface override. Military grade. Illegal. The kind of tech that got you court-martialed just for looking at it. He had kept it as an insurance policy, a souvenir from a war that taught him never to trust the chain of command. He inserted the chip into the data port at the base of his skull. The sensation was like ice water being poured directly into his brain. His vision fractaled, overlaying the grimy bathroom with streams of cascading code. He could see the station's heartbeat. He could see the flow of data, the security protocols, the hidden back doors. "Hello, old friend," Adrian whispered. He synced his mind with the station's local net. He didn't just hack it. He became it. He traced the security tag on Naira's cuffs. She wasn't going to the detention block. The signal was moving towards Sector 89, the warehouse, the black site. They weren't arresting her. They were erasing her. "Not today," Adrian growled. He needed a distraction. A big one. He accessed the secure channel he used to keep in touch with the old guard, the handful of other veterans working dead-end jobs on the station. "Old Dog Tupaki" broadcasted. "Code Broken Arrow. The fox is in the trap. I need chaos. I need it now." The response was immediate. "Copy, Old Dog. Initiating OOPS protocols." 3 minutes later, the Oriole ring began to glitch. In the luxury residential sector, the fire suppression system decided that the executive lounge was on fire and doused 300 Heliodyne VPs in flame-retardant foam. In the cargo docks, the gravity plating on level 4 inverted, leaving 3,000 tons of cargo floating gently against the ceiling. In the main promenade, the holographic sky malfunctioned, replacing the soothing image of a nebula with a flashing 50-foot error message that read, "Insert coin to continue." Security channels exploded with chatter. Patrols were diverted. Panic was low-grade, but widespread. The eyes of the station turned away from Sector 89. Adrian moved. He didn't run. Running drew attention. He walked with purpose, his tool belt swinging against his hip. He looked like a man going to fix a problem, which technically he was. He reached the service elevator for the industrial sector. A guard was posted. "Restricted access," the guard said, looking bored. "Atmospheric recyclers are backing up on 89, Adrian said, pointing to his datapad, which was displaying a terrifyingly red graph he had just forged. "Unless you want the director's office to smell like sulfur and bad decisions, I need to flush the vents." The guard wrinkled his nose. "Go ahead, make it quick." Adrian stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, he dropped the act. He pulled the kinetic pulse pistol from his belt and checked the charge. Sector 89 was a ghost town of towering crates and silent machinery. But in the center, bathed in harsh floodlights, was a prefab structure that didn't belong. 2 guards stood outside the door. Adrian didn't have time for stealth. He had the element of surprise and 20 years of repressed anger. He stepped out of the shadows. "Gentlemen," the guards turned. Adrian fired. 2 pulse rounds center mass. They were stun charges, but at this range they hit like a sledgehammer. The guards folded, groaning. Adrian stepped over them and kicked the door open. Inside, it looked like a sterile hell. White walls, surgical equipment, and a chair in the center of the room. Naira was strapped to the chair. Director Morrow stood over her, holding a datapad. A medical drone hovered nearby, extending a syringe filled with a clear, viscous liquid. "Memory dampeners," Morrow was saying, her voice conversational. "We find it helps the resettlement process if the subjects don't remember their difficult transition." "Get away from her," Adrian said. Morrow turned slowly. She didn't look frightened. She looked annoyed. "Mr. Cole," she sighed. "I was wondering when you would show up. You veterans have such a predictable hero complex." "Let her go," Adrian said. leveling the pistol at Morrow's chest. "And do what shoot me," Morrow smirked. "I am a director of Heliodyne. My biometric monitor is linked to the station's defense grid. You flatline me and the automated turrets in this room turn you into paste before my body hits the floor." "He is not going to shoot you," Naira said. Her voice was weak, but her eyes were locked on Adrian. "He is too smart for that." "She is right," Adrian said. "I am not going to shoot you." He shifted his aim and fired. The pulse round slammed into the medical drone. It exploded in a shower of sparks and glass. "I am going to break your toys," Adrian said. He fired again, blowing out the main control console on the wall. The lights flickered and died, replaced by the red strobing of emergency klaxons. "Security," Morrow screamed into her comms. "They are a little busy," Adrian said. He lunged forward, pistol whipping a guard who tried to enter from the side door. He reached the chair. His hands moved with practice speed, overriding the magnetic locks. The cuffs snapped open. Naira slumped forward. Adrian caught her. She smelled of antiseptic and fear, but underneath, she smelled like cinnamon and ozone her scent. "You are an idiot," she whispered against his chest. "A magnificent, stupid idiot." "I told you," Adrian grunted, hauling her to her feet. "I came to collect it for dinner. You owe me a dessert." "They are coming," Naira said, her ears swiveling towards the door. "Heavy boots. 6 of them." "Then we leave," Adrian said. "Do you trust me?" Naira looked at him. The human who had bought her soup. The soldier who had just stormed a corporate black site for her. "With my life," she said. "But not with my navigation. You have a terrible sense of direction." "Right," Adrian grinned. "You navigate, I'll clear the path." They ran. It was a desperate lung-burning sprint through the guts of the station. They scrambled up maintenance ladders, slid down gravity chutes, and squeezed through ventilation ducts that were never designed for a full-grown human male. "Faster, human," Naira hissed, pulling him up a ledge. "My grandmother climbs faster than this, and she has arthritis." "Your grandmother has claws," Adrian wheezed. "I am working with fingernails and bad knees here." They burst out into the Volari market district. It was a maze of hanging fabrics, steam vents, and narrow stalls. In here, an old Volari woman hissed, pulling aside a tapestry. They ducked into a cramped spice shop. The woman pointed to a trapdoor under a rug. "Down, quickly! The patrols are sweeping the upper walkways." They huddled in the dark crawl space, breathing hard. Adrian could feel Naira's heart beating against his arm. "This is insane," Adrian whispered. "We are trapped. Morrow will lock down the whole station." "Then we unlock it," Naira said. "You said you had data, the logs." "I do," Adrian tapped his temple. "It is all here, but I need a transmitter, a big one. The station's public broadcast array." "The main array is in the command spire," Naira said. "That is the most heavily guarded point on the ring." "Not if we go from the outside," Adrian said. Naira looked at him in the dark. "You mean a spacewalk without suits?" "Maintenance suits," Adrian corrected. "There is an EVA locker near the thermal exhaust port. It is suicide, but it is the only way up." "I hate you," Naira said, but she was already moving. "Let's go." The climb up the exterior of the command spire was a nightmare of vertigo and freezing vacuum. The maintenance suits were bulky, smelling of stale sweat and fear. Below them, the storm of Helion-4 raged a swirling eye of death. Above them, the stars looked cold and indifferent. They reached the broadcast junction. Adrian jacked his neural interface into the port. "I am uploading the package," Adrian said over the comms. "Employment bonds, the kidnapping logs, the casualty reports from the mines, and," he paused, "the shipping manifests of the Void Runner." "Do it," Naira said. She was scanning the airlock door behind them. "They are cutting through. 2 minutes." Adrian initiated the sequence. Files uploading, 20%, 40%. Inside the station, the screens changed. Every billboard, every wristcom, every menu in every restaurant flickered and died. Then a new image appeared. It wasn't Director Morrow's polished smile. It was a raw, grainy video feed from Adrian's memory files. It showed the UNS Purgatory warping away. It showed the list of dead soldiers. Then, it cut to the modern logs, the names of the missing Valari, the profit margins on their labor, the video of the security guard threatening Nira. And over it all, Adrian's voice recorded moments ago. My name is Sergeant Adrian Cole. 20 years ago, I watched 40 good men die, because it was cheaper to let them rot than to extract them. Today, I watched a mother get dragged away because she dared to ask for a fair wage. We are not citizens to them. We are numbers. We are debris. Upload complete. The airlock door behind them exploded inward. Morrow stood there flanked by 4 heavy assault troopers. She was not smiling anymore. She looked like a cornered viper. "Cut the feed!" she screamed at her tech officer. "Cut it now!" "I can't!" the officer yelled back. "It is hard-coded into the emergency override channel. It is playing on every screen from here to the orbital council." Morrow turned to Adrian and Nira, who were standing by the console, helmets off, now that the room was pressurized. "You think this saves you?" Morrow hissed. "You just signed your death warrants. I will spin this. I will say you are terrorists who hijacked the signal to spread propaganda. Who will they believe, the director of Heliodyne or a washed-up janitor with PTSD?" She stepped forward, her eyes drilling into Adrian. "I know about Gara-7, Adrian," she said softly. "I read your file. You signed the waiver. You accepted the mission. You knew the risks. You killed those men just as much as we did. You are just looking for someone else to blame for your own failure." Adrian flinched. The words hit the soft, rotting spot in his soul, where the guilt lived. "Maybe," Adrian said, his voice hollow. "Maybe I did fail them. I stayed quiet for 20 years. I took the pension. I took the job." He looked at Morrow, his eyes wet but steady. "But I am done being quiet." Morrow raised her hand to signal the troopers to fire. "Wait!" Nira shouted. She didn't step in front of Adrian. She stepped to the console. "You think you can spin this?" Nira said, her fingers flying across the controls. "Let's see you spin this." She wasn't flying a ship, but she was flying the system. She used her traffic control clearance, which Morrow had forgotten to revoke in the chaos, to access the room's internal sensors. She activated the holographic projector in the center of the room. Suddenly, the room was filled with a giant 3-dimensional replay of the last 5 minutes. Morrow screams, "Cut the feed!" Morrow admitted she knew about Gara-7. Morrow ordered the troopers to kill them, and she broadcasted that live. "Smile, Director," Nira snarled, baring her teeth in a feral grin. "You are on the council channel." Morrow froze. She looked up at the hologram of herself, ordering an execution. She looked at the camera light, blinking on the console. She realized with dawning horror that the entire station and the oversight committee on the moon above was watching her confess. "Arrest them!" Morrow shrieked, losing her composure entirely. "Kill them all!" The troopers hesitated. They looked at the director. They looked at the live feed. They looked at the veteran standing tall, and the foxwoman with fire in her eyes. They lowered their weapons. "Director Morrow," the lead trooper said, his voice heavy with resignation. "I think we should wait for the council marshals." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the hum of the servers. Adrian looked at Nira. They were both shaking. Adrenaline was crashing, leaving them trembling and exhausted. He reached out and took her hand. Her paw was warm, her claws retracted. "You okay?" he asked. "No," she laughed breathlessly. I think I am going to throw up. And then I am going to faint. Don't faint yet, Adrian said, squeezing her hand. We still have to go pick up the kids. Nira looked at him. Her eyes were wide, shining with tears and something else, something fierce and tender. You came for us, she whispered. You really came. I told you, Adrian said, his voice thick with emotion. I hate eating alone. If we get out of this, Nira said, leaning her forehead against his shoulder. If we don't go to prison for the rest of our lives. Yeah, I am never letting you pick the restaurant again. Your choices are too exciting. Adrian laughed. It was a broken, ragged sound, but it was real. Deal, he said. Behind them, the airlock cycled. The council marshals were arriving. Their armor was white and gold distinct from Heliodyne's blue. Adrian Cole, Nira Velis, the marshal announced. You are to be taken into protective custody as key witnesses in the tribunal inquiry of Director Helena Morrow. Adrian looked at Morrow, who was now slumped against the wall defeated. It is over, he said. No, Nira said, looking out the viewport at the station lights below. It is just beginning. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a silence that was almost louder than the sirens. Safe house. Beta 9 was located in the upper spire of the Oriole Ring, a sector usually reserved for visiting diplomats and high-ranking auditors. The walls were not the grimy, riveted metal Adrian was used to. They were sleek, pearl-white polymers that hummed with efficient climate control. The air smelled of nothing, no ozone, no frying oil, no recycled sweat. It smelled like bureaucracy. This bed is too soft, Adrian muttered, sitting on the edge of the mattress. He poked it with a finger. It is like sleeping on a cloud that is trying to suffocate you. Across the room, Nira was sitting by the viewport staring out at the swirling storms of Helion 4. She had been staring for an hour. Cairo and Sori were asleep in the next room, exhausted by the trauma of the past 24 hours. It is better than a detention cell, Nira said, quietly, not turning around. Is it? Adrian asked. He stood up and paced the room. It was a small habit checking the perimeter, even though the perimeter was a luxury suite with a minibar. We are locked in. Security detail outside. No communication with the outside world. We just traded one cage for a nicer cage. We are alive, Adrian, Nira said. She finally turned to look at him. Her eyes were tired, the gold dulled by stress, but her gaze was steady. Morrow is in custody. The council is investigating. We did it. Did we? Adrian stopped pacing. He ran a hand through his graying hair. We started a fire, Nira. I checked the news feeds before they cut our access. There are riots in the lower sectors. Heliodyne security is cracking down. People are getting hurt because we decided to play the hero. He felt the old weight, settling on his shoulders, the familiar ghost of Gara 7. Mission, accomplished casualties acceptable. That was what the debriefing had said 20 years ago. He wondered what the debriefing would say this time. You are doing it again, Nira said. Doing what? Carrying the weight of the entire universe, she said. She stood up and walked over to him. She was shorter than him, but at that moment she felt taller. She poked him in the chest with a clawed finger. You think you are the only one responsible? You think those people rioting did not want to riot before? We did not start the fire, Adrian. We just opened a window so the smoke could get out. Adrian looked at her. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that his actions were pure, that the chaos was necessary, but he knew the cost of disruption. I promise to keep you safe, he said softly. Now you are a witness in the biggest corporate trial in a century. Half the station thinks you are a saint. The other half thinks you are a terrorist. That is not safe. I do not want safety if the price is my freedom, Nira said. And I do not want my children to grow up thinking that keeping their heads down is the only way to survive. She reached out and took his hand. Her grip was firm. We are in this together, human. You are not allowed to be guilty alone. The days in the safe house blurred into a strange routine. They were waiting for the tribunal, hearing a legal behemoth that moved with the glacial speed of interstellar bureaucracy. In the meantime, they had to live. It was a bizarre domestic experiment. A combat-hardened human veteran, a Volari mother, and 2 alien children trapped in a white room with nothing to do but wait. Breakfast became an event. The safe house had a food synthesizer that could make anything a stark contrast to the nutrient paste Adrian was used to. Computer, Sori commanded, standing on a chair to reach the interface. Make me a fish that tastes like strawberries. The synthesizer whirred and produced a pink, fish-shaped lump. Sori took a bite, made a face, and spat it out. Science has gone too far, Adrian noted dryly from the sofa, where he was trying to fix Kiro's broken toy drone with a butter knife. You are encouraging her, Nira said, coming out of the bedroom. She was wearing a council-issue robe that was 3 sizes too big for her. She looked ridiculous and beautiful. I am expanding her culinary horizons, Adrian said. Kiro, hold this steady. If I short-circuit the gyroscope, it is going to fly backwards forever. Kiro held the drone with intense concentration. The boy had changed. He was less fearful, more watchful. He followed Adrian around the suite like a shadow absorbing everything. Adrian, Kiro asked. Yeah, kid. When the bad lady is gone, will we have to go back to the old room? Adrian stopped working. He looked at the boy. I don't know, Adrian said honestly. But I promise you won't go back to being hungry. I miss our old room, Sori chimed in, abandoning her strawberry fish. It smelled like home. This place smells like teeth cleaning. Nira laughed a soft barking sound. It smells like sterile polymer, Sori. But yes, it lacks character. Later that afternoon, Nira found Adrian in the small study, staring at a holographic chessboard. Teach me, she said. Chess, Adrian asked. It is a human game. Lots of rules about horses moving in L shapes. No, Nira said, sitting opposite him. Teach me how to lie. Adrian raised an eyebrow. Excuse me. You said you lied to the security sensors, Nira said. You said you tricked the system. If we are going to stand in front of the council, I need to know how to hide my fear. I need to know how to make them look where I want them to look. Adrian leaned back. That is not lying, Nira. That is tactical misdirection. Teach me tactical misdirection then, she said. So he did. He taught her how to control her breathing to lower her heart rate. He taught her how to keep her ears still, because Volari ears were a dead giveaway of emotion. He taught her how to answer a question with a question, how to use silence as a weapon. In return, she taught him Volari. No, she corrected him, laughing as he butchered a vowel. It is not Garka. That means smelly foot. You want Garko. That means brave heart. Your language is 70% growling, Adrian complained. And yours is 70% unnecessary vowels, she countered. They sat close together, their knees touching under the table. The tension of the looming trial was there, but in these moments it felt distant. Adrian, Nira said softly, looking at the chessboard. What happens after the trial? If we win? If we are free? Adrian looked at the pieces on the board. He had spent 20 years thinking only about surviving until the next shift. He had never planned for an after. I don't know, he said. I suppose I will go back to fixing air ducts. And you go back to guiding ships. That sounds lonely, Nira said. Yeah, Adrian admitted. It does. He looked at her. The light from the viewport caught the copper fur on her cheek. Maybe, he said slowly. I could find a job that doesn't involve crawling in vents. Maybe I could find a place with a bigger kitchen, for guests. Naira smiled. It was a small, private smile. I know a good cook. She is very cheap. Mostly work for rent and chocolate milk. Sounds like a fair trade, Adrian said. The day of the hearing arrived with the subtlety of an orbital bombardment. A council legal team arrived to prepare them. The lead lawyer was a Solarian, a tall amphibian species with rapid speech patterns and skin that looked wet. Okay, here is the strategy, the lawyer said, pacing the room. We paint you as victims, helpless refugees crushed by the corporate machine. Adrian, you are the broken veteran, mentally scarred acting on impulse to save the damsel. Naira, you are the weeping mother terrified for your children. We need tears. We need sympathy. We need to make the council feel bad about their stock portfolios. Adrian felt his jaw tighten. I am not playing the broken soldier card. It tests well with the demographics, the lawyer insisted. People love tragedy. I am not a tragedy, Adrian growled. And she is not a damsel. She hacked the internal sensors of a black site while under fire. She is a warrior. That does not sell Mr. Cole, the lawyer snapped. Warriors are threatening. Victims are safe. If you want to win, you play the part. Naira stood up. She smoothed her tunic. She looked at the lawyer with the cool, predatory gaze of a fox spotting a mouse. We are not here to sell anything, Naira said. Her voice was calm, utilizing the breathing technique Adrian had taught her. We are here to tell the truth. And the truth is that we are not helpless. We are angry. And we are right. The lawyer blinked. Anger does not work on the council. Then we will make it work, Adrian said, standing beside her. We do it our way. Or we don't testify. The council chamber was a vast amphitheater of floating platforms and holographic displays. Hundreds of representatives from different species sat in the tiered rows. In the center, suspended in a beam of light, was Director Morrow. She looked different. Her hair was still perfect, her suit impeccable, but her eyes were hard. She was not defeated. She was calculating. Adrian and Naira stood on the witness platform. State your names for the record, the presiding counselor intoned. Sergeant Adrian Cole, retired. 7th Deep Recon, Adrian said. Naira Velis, pilot first class. Volari Remnant, Naira said. The hearing began. It was a bloodbath of words. Morrow's defense team tried to tear them apart. They brought up Adrian's medical history, his insubordination during the war. They painted Naira as a debt dodger who seduced a lonely old man to help her commit corporate espionage. Is it not true, Mr. Cole, Morrow's lawyer sneered, that you have a history of hallucinations, that you blamed your commanding officers for your own tactical failures on Gara 7? Adrian gripped the railing. He could feel the anger rising the red mist. Tactical misdirection, he thought. Don't let them see where you are bleeding. I have a history of surviving, Adrian said calmly. And yes, I blamed my commanders. Because they were not there. Just like Director Morrow was not in the warehouse when her guards were beating refugees. He looked up at the council. You want to talk about my mental health? Fine. I have nightmares. I see the faces of the men I lost. But you know what I don't see? I don't see the profit margins that justified their deaths. That is what Director Morrow sees. She sees numbers where there should be people. Then it was Naira's turn. Ms. Velis, the lawyer asked, you signed the employment bond voluntarily. You agreed to the terms. Are you now claiming you did not understand the contract? Naira stepped forward. Her ears were still. Her voice was steady. I understood the words, she said. I did not understand that relocation meant disappearance. I did not understand that safety inspection meant intimidation. She pulled up the holographic evidence they had stolen, the logs, the names. This is not a contract, she said, pointing to the list of the missing. This is a menu. You ate my people. You consumed their lives to fuel your factories. And you called it charity." The chamber erupted in murmurs. Morrow stood up. "This is preposterous. These are fabricated logs. The Volari are transient workers. They leave. They move on. We cannot track every single one of them." "We tracked them," Adrian said. He projected the flight path of the Void Runner. "We tracked the ship that took them. The same ship that left my unit to die. It is a circle, Morrow. A circle of blood and money." The evidence was overwhelming. The connection between the old military surplus and the new trafficking ring was undeniable. But politics is not about truth. It is about leverage. During the recess, a council aide approached them. "You have made a strong case," the aide whispered. "But Heliodyne is essential to the station's economy. If we dismantle them, the ring collapses. There is a compromise on the table." "What compromise?" Adrian asked. "Morrow steps down. She retires with full benefits. Heliodyne pays a fine. You two get a settlement, a very generous one. Enough to buy a private moon. And you sign a non-disclosure agreement stating that this was an isolated incident of mismanagement." Adrian looked at Nira. "A private moon. Safety. For Kiro and Sori. No more debt. No more fear." "And the Volari?" Nira asked. "The ones still in the warehouse?" "They will be processed," the aide said vaguely. "Released over time, to avoid disrupting the labor market." Nira looked at Adrian. "They want us to sell out." "They want to buy our silence," Adrian said. "Just like they bought my silence with a pension 20 years ago." He turned to the aide. "No deal." "Mr. Cole, be reasonable," the aide hissed. "You cannot win against the whole system." "We don't have to win against the system," Adrian said. "We just have to break it." They returned to the chamber. "We reject the compromise," Adrian announced to the stunned room. "We demand full liquidation of the employment bond program. We demand the immediate release of all held workers. And we demand a criminal trial for Helena Morrow, not a retirement party." "This is an outrage," Morrow shouted. "You are letting emotions dictate policy." "Yes," Nira said, her voice ringing clear. "Because policy without emotion is just efficient cruelty." The council voted. It was close. The corporate interests fought hard. But the public pressure, the riots, the broadcast, the undeniable image of a mother fighting for her children tipped the scales. Motion carried. Investigation authorized. Director Morrow remanded to custody. The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot, but this time it was the good kind. Back in the safe house, the mood was subdued. They had won, but they were exhausted. Adrian sat on the sofa, staring at the ceiling. "We did it," he whispered. Nira sat beside him. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "We did." "So," Adrian said, "no private moon." "I prefer stations anyway," Nira said. "Moons are too quiet." A chime sounded at the door. It was a courier drone. It dropped a small data packet on the table. "For Mr. Adrian Cole," the drone chirped. "From an anonymous source in the Oversight Committee. Regarding supplemental evidence. File 88 Bravo." "What is this?" Adrian asked, picking up the drive. "More dirt on Morrow," Nira asked. "Probably," Adrian said. "I'll look at it later. Right now I think I promised Sori a story about a space whale." He tossed the drive onto the desk. Later that night, after the kids were asleep and Nira was dozing on the couch, Adrian couldn't sleep. The adrenaline was still humming in his veins. He walked over to the desk. He picked up the drive. Supplemental evidence. He slotted it into his reader. It was a cache of internal comms from Morrow's personal server. Most of it was boring administrative evil bribes cover-ups. But one file caught his eye. It was time-stamped the day of his blind date. The day this all started. Subject surveillance target. Cole Adrian. From Security Chief Vance to Director Morrow. Target is en route to Spindle Vista. We have the ambush team in position near the ventilation shaft. We need him isolated. The blind date is a variable we cannot control. If he meets the contact, he might leave the sector before we can grab the Valari woman. He needs to be stationary, Adrian frowned. He scrolled down. Reply from Director Morrow neutralize the variable. Send a cancellation. Use the standard spoofing protocol. Make him wait. I want him sitting there when we take the Vixen. If he intervenes, we kill him and claim self-defense. If he stays seated, we have a witness that he did nothing. Attached log, outgoing message, sent to Riscom ID, ACOL77, content. One text, I'm not coming, something came up, sorry. Adrian stared at the screen. The blood drained from his face. The text that had broken his heart. The text that had made him feel like a worthless, washed-up old man. It wasn't from his date. His date had probably never even received the invitation or had been intercepted. The text was from Morrow. She had canceled his date to keep him in the chair. She had wanted him there. She had used his loneliness as a tactical anchor. She wanted him to be a passive observer to Naira's destruction. She had engineered the very moment that led to her downfall. If she hadn't sent that text, Adrian might have left. He might have gone to a different bar. He might have been 10 minutes late. But because she wanted to control him, she put him exactly where he needed to be to save Naira. Adrian started to laugh. It was a low, rumbling laugh that shook his chest. You clever, stupid witch, he whispered to the image of Morrow on the screen. You sent me the invitation to your own funeral. He looked over at Naira sleeping peacefully on the couch. Her chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. The villain hadn't just created her own enemy. She had created a family. Adrian closed the file. Adrian closed at the... He didn't feel angry anymore. He felt ready. He walked over to the couch and pulled the blanket up over Naira's shoulders. Sleep well, partner, he whispered. Tomorrow we have a lot of work to do. He looked out the window at the Oriole ring. It was still spinning, still grinding, but the lights looked a little brighter tonight. The sound of the gavel striking the acoustic block in the council chamber did not sound like justice. Justice in Adrian's experience usually sounded like gunfire or the screaming of engines. This sound was small, wooden, and strangely anticlimactic. The motion carries, the High Counselor announced, his voice echoing through the vast, tiered chamber. By order of the Interspecies Oversight Committee, the corporate charter for Heliodyne operations on the Oriole Ring is hereby revoked effective immediately. All executive assets are frozen pending the conclusion of the criminal tribunal. The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds before the room exploded into noise. Adrian stood by the railing, his hands gripping the cold metal. Beside him, Naira let out a breath that seemed to have been held for 5 years. Her knees buckled slightly, and Adrian caught her by the elbow, steadying her. "It is over," he said, his voice rough with disuse. He had spent the last 48 hours talking to lawyers, and his throat felt like he had swallowed a handful of gravel. "Not yet," Naira whispered. She reached up to her neck. The debt collar, a sleek band of black polymer that had been chafing her skin for 3 years, let out a soft, descending chime. The locking mechanism disengaged with a mechanical hiss. It clicked open and fell from her neck, clattering onto the floor of the council box. Naira stared at it. She rubbed her neck where the fur was matted and the skin was raw. Then she looked up at Adrian, and the gold in her eyes was brighter than the nebula swirling outside the viewport. "Now," she said, a fierce smile breaking through her exhaustion. "Now it is over." The fallout was swift and chaotic. The Oriole Ring was a beast that had been decapitated, and the body was thrashing. Heliodyne security forces, confused and leaderless, were surrendering in droves or barricading themselves in the lower levels. The refugee sectors were in a state of riotous celebration that threatened to turn into anarchy. Amidst this, Adrian found himself sitting in a conference room that smelled of expensive polish and hypocrisy. Across the table sat 3 members of the Interim Governance Committee. They looked tired. They looked like people who had realized that winning the war meant they now had to clean up the battlefield. "We have a problem, Mr. Cole," the Solarian representative said, shuffling a stack of data slates. "We have removed the wolves, but the sheep are panicking. The station's security infrastructure has collapsed. We need someone who knows. The systems knows the personnel, and frankly, someone the public does not want to throw out of an airlock." Adrian leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. He was wearing a clean tunic provided by the safe house, but he still felt like a grease-stained mechanic. "You want me to run security?" Adrian said flatly. "We want you to rebuild it," the representative corrected. "Director Morrow ran a police state. We need a peacekeeping force. You are a veteran. You are a hero of the resistance. You have the trust of the Volari community." "I am not a cop," Adrian said. "And I definitely am not a politician." "No," the representative agreed. "You are a janitor. You fix things. And right now, the Oriole ring is broken." Adrian looked out the window. He could see the Spindle Vista in the distance, the place where he had sat waiting for a date that never came. He thought of the security guard looming over Kiro. He thought of the fear in Sori's eyes. "I have conditions," Adrian said, turning back to the table. The representative blinked. "Excuse me." "1," Adrian held up a finger. "I do not hire mercenaries. I hire veterans. There are 200 former service members on this station working in waste disposal and cargo hauling because Heliodyne blacklisted them. I want them back in uniform. They know how to follow rules of engagement." "Agreed," the representative said quickly. 2, Adrian continued. "We recruit from the refugee population. Volari Tellarites humans. If the security force does not look like the people it is protecting, it is an occupation army. I want 20% of the force to be non-human within 6 months." "That will take significant training resources," the representative frowned. 3, Adrian interrupted, leaning forward. "No more debt enforcement. My officers protect people, not profit margins. If a corporation has a billing dispute, they send a lawyer, not a guy with a shock baton. If I catch one of my people intimidating a civilian over credits, I will personally throw them in the brig." The room was silent. The representatives exchanged glances. They were politicians. They hated giving up control. But they looked at the riots on the news feeds, and then they looked at the stone-faced man who had brought down a director with a broadcast and a bad attitude. "You have your mandate, Commander Cole," the representative said. Adrian stood up. "Don't call me Commander, just call me the guy who cleans up the mess." The transition from witness to resident was jarring. Naira, Kiro, and Sori were granted unconditional permanent residency. The debt was declared null and void, classified as illegal servitude under the new station charter. For the first time in their lives, they owned their own time. They chose to stay. Why? Adrian had asked them one night as they packed up their belongings from the safe house. "You could go to the rim. You could find a planet with real dirt." "This is our home, Adrian," Kiro had said, puffing out his chest. "We fought for it. You don't fight for a place and then leave." "Besides," Sori added, holding up a drawing she had made of a spaceship eating a security drone, "my friends are here, and the Fish Museum is here, so they moved. Not back to the cramped, airless unit in the refugee sector, and not to Adrian's coffin-sized quarters near the recyclers. With his new salary, which was embarrassingly large, and Naira's back pay restitution, they leased a family unit in Sector 12. It had 3 bedrooms, a kitchen that could fit more than one person at a time, and a viewport that looked out at the stars instead of a ventilation shaft. Moving day was a comedy of errors. "That box is heavy," Adrian groaned, maneuvering a crate of books through the doorway. "What is in here?" "Rocks." "Textbooks," Kiro said, watching him with amusement. "Physics. I am going to be a pilot, Dad. I need to know how gravity works." The word hung in the air for a split second. "Dad." Kiro froze his ears, flushing a dark rust color. He looked terrified, as if he had broken a rule. Adrian set the box down gently. He straightened up and looked at the boy. "Gravity is important," Adrian said, his voice thick. "But lift with your knees, not your back. That is lesson number 1. Kiro grinned, the tension vanishing. "Yes, sir." "And no more sir," Adrian added, ruffling the fur on the boy's head. Dad is fine." Naira walked in, carrying a lamp, smiling so hard her whiskers twitched. "I claim the big bedroom," she announced. "Unless the new head of security snores, in which case he is sleeping on the sofa." "I do not snore," Adrian protested. "I breathe with authority." "You sound like a warp drive failing to engage," Sori yelled from the bathroom. "Mutiny," Adrian muttered. "I am surrounded by mutineers." But he slept better that night on a mattress on the floor of the half-painted living room than he had in 20 years. The bonding ritual happened 2 weeks later. It was not a legal requirement. The station recognized them as a household unit for tax purposes. But for the Volari paper meant nothing. Family was biological, or it was chosen, and if it was chosen, it had to be sealed. They gathered in the community center of the Volari district. The room was lit by low amber lanterns and smelled of burning sage and sweet spices. An elder, a vixen with fur gone completely white, presided over the ceremony. Adrian sat in the center of the circle, feeling large and clumsy and incredibly human. Naira sat opposite him, with Kiro and Sori on either side. "To share a pack is to share a soul," the elder intoned her voice, rasping like dry leaves. "It is to share the hunt, the meal, and the defense of the den. Do you, Adrian Cole of Earth, accept the scent and the burden of this pack?" "I do," Adrian said. "Do you, Naira Velis of Volari Prime, accept this human into the circle to cover his blind spots and share his warmth?" "I do," Naira said softly. The elder brought forward a small ceremonial bowl. Inside was a mixture of ink and organic compounds, a symbolic representation of scent. Naira dipped her thumb into the bowl. She reached forward and pressed it against Adrian's forehead, then his throat. "My scent is your scent," she whispered. Adrian repeated the gesture, marking her in return. The ink was cool against his skin. Then came the modern part of the ritual, adapted for a spacefaring species. The elder produced a small medical scanner. "We bind the data," the elder said. She took a painless genetic sample from Adrian, then from Naira, Kiro, and Sori. The scanner hummed, weaving the digital signatures together into a single encrypted file. "This is your pack key," the elder said, handing Adrian a data chip worn on a pendant. "In the eyes of our people, your blood is mixed. If one bleeds, all bleed. If one eats, all eat." Sori crawled into Adrian's lap, curling her tail around his wrist. Kiro leaned against his shoulder. Adrian looked at the crowd of Volari watching them. There was no judgment in their eyes anymore. He was no longer the outsider or the human savior. He was just a male who had found his pack. "Thank you," Adrian whispered. Naira leaned across and pressed her forehead against his. "Welcome home, human." Life settled into a rhythm that was frighteningly normal. Adrian went to work at the new security headquarters. He spent his days firing corrupt officers, reviewing patrol logs, and arguing with the council for budget increases to fix the life support systems in the lower sectors. He came home, smelling of coffee and office supplies instead of ozone and grease. Naira returned to the traffic control tower, but this time as a senior supervisor. She ran the shift with an iron fist and a compassionate ear, ensuring no pilot was ever forced to fly unsafe tonnage again. Their romance was not a whirlwind of flowers and poetry. It was quiet. It was Adrian fixing the leaky faucet, while Naira criticized his choice of wrench. It was Naira teaching him how to cook spicy Volari roots, laughing when he turned red and drank a liter of milk. "You painted the wall sunset orange," Adrian said, one evening, standing in the living room with his hands on his hips. "It is warm," Naira defended, stirring a pot of stew. The gray made the room look like a brig. "It looks like a pumpkin exploded," Adrian countered, walking into the kitchen. He wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "But I like pumpkins." "You are soft, Adrian," she murmured, leaning back into him. "The great warrior has become a domesticated pet." "Don't tell the troops," he said, kissing her behind the ear, a spot he knew made her shiver. "I have a reputation to maintain." It was 3 months after the trial that the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Adrian was in his home office reviewing a cache of encrypted data that had been recovered from Heliodyne's secure servers during the liquidation. It was mostly boring financial records, shell companies, and tax evasion schemes. He was about to close the file labeled Operation Silent Watch when a timestamp caught his eye. 1900 hours. Day cycle 744. That was the date of the blind date. The date he sat in the spindle vista. He opened the file. It was a surveillance log. Audio and video transcripts from Director Morrow's personal channel. Transcript A1113 from Security Chief Vance to Director Morrow. Target Cole Adrian is en route to the spindle vista. We have the ambush team in position near the ventilation shaft to extract the Volari female Velis Naira. We need the area clear of interference, but we need a witness. Someone credible but controllable. Adrian frowned. He leaned closer to the screen. Reply from Director Morrow used the veteran. He is isolated. He is waiting for a blind date arrangement made by his former squad mate. Intercept the date's communication. Block her arrival. Keep him in the chair. If he leaves, Vance asked. He won't leave if he thinks she is just late. Send a text to his wristcom. Use the standard spoofing protocol. Make it personal, but vague. I'm not coming. Something came up. That will hit his insecurity. He will sit there and feel sorry for himself. He will be the perfect passive observer. If the extraction gets messy and he intervenes, we kill him and claim he snapped from PTSD. If he stays seated, his presence validates that the arrest was standard procedure. Adrian read the text again. One text, I'm not coming. Something came up. Sorry. He sat back in his chair, the air leaving his lungs in a rush. For months, he had wondered about the woman who never showed up. He had wondered if he was unlovable, if he was too old, too broken. He had carried that small shard of rejection in his heart. But she hadn't rejected him. She never even knew. The text was a weapon. It was a tactical maneuver designed by Helena Morrow to pin him to a chair so he could watch a mother be destroyed. She had orchestrated the entire evening. She wanted him there. She wanted the washed-up veteran to be a prop in her play. But she had miscalculated one variable. She assumed Adrian Cole was a man who would sit still when he saw injustice. She assumed his loneliness would make him passive. Instead, her text had planted him exactly where he needed to be to save Naira. If the date had arrived, Adrian would have been focused on her. He might not have noticed the guard. He might not have intervened. If the text hadn't been sent, he might have left 10 minutes earlier, missing the confrontation entirely. Morrow had practically walked him to the table, pulled out the chair, and handed him the opportunity to destroy her empire. Adrian started to chuckle. The chuckle turned into a laugh, a deep, resonant sound that came from the belly. Naira appeared in the doorway holding 2 mugs of tea. Her ears swiveled forward in concern. "Adrian, what is it? Is it bad news?" Adrian wiped a tear from his eye. He stood up and took the tea from her, setting it on the desk. "No," he said. "It is the best news I have heard in years." He picked up the data pad and walked her to the balcony. The aureole ring stretched out below them, a glittering arc of lights against the darkness of space. He could see the spindle vista far below, a tiny speck of light. "You know that text message," Adrian said, gesturing to the station below. "The one that broke my heart and made me buy you soup." "The I am not coming text?" Naira asked. It wasn't from my date, Adrian said. It was from Morrow. He explained it to her. He told her about the log, the plan, the arrogance of a villain who thought people were just chess pieces. Naira listened, her eyes widening. She looked down at the spindle vista, then back at Adrian. He expected her to be angry. He expected her to rage at the manipulation, at the fact that their meeting was engineered by a monster. Instead, a slow smile spread across her face. Her whiskers twitched. Naira started to giggle. She set us up. She was our matchmaker, Adrian laughed. The most evil, corrupt, incompetent matchmaker in the galaxy. If she had just let you have your date, Naira said, leaning against the railing, shaking her head, she might still be director. She destroyed her own life just to make sure you were single for dinner. I think I should send her a thank you card to the prison colony, Adrian mused. Maybe a fruit basket. No, Naira said. She reached up and smoothed the collar of his shirt. Living well is the best revenge. She is in a cell eating paste, and we are here drinking tea, looking at the stars. Adrian wrapped his arm around her shoulders. He pulled her close. The scent of her fur, cinnamon, and ozone filled his senses. You are right, he said. No fruit basket. She hates fruit anyway. They stood there in silence for a long time, watching the ships dock and depart. The anger that had fueled Adrian for so long was gone. The desire for revenge had burned itself out, leaving behind something stronger, peace. Adrian, Naira said softly. Yeah, I am glad she sent the text. Me too, Adrian said. Best text I ever got. Epilogue. 6 months later. The morning was bright, or as bright as the simulated day cycle allowed. In the living room, Sori was standing on a chair taping a large piece of paper to the wall. It was a drawing done in crayons. It depicted 4 figures. One was tall and human, holding a wrench. One was a vixen with bright orange fur. One was a boy holding a model spaceship. And one was a small girl with oversized ears. They were standing around a table. The table was piled high with food, impossibly high, like a mountain of bread rolls and soup bowls. Underneath, in jagged childish handwriting, were the words, Our pack, our home. The front door hissed open. Kira walked in. He was wearing the crisp gray cadet uniform of the Oriole Flight Academy. He looked older, taller, his shoulders squared with confidence. Dad, Mom, Kiro shouted. I passed top 10% in the simulator. Nira ran out of the kitchen, wiping flour from her hands, and engulfed him in a hug. I knew it. I told you you have the hands for it. Adrian followed her, grinning. He clapped Kiro on the shoulder. Good work, kid. Did you remember to check your stabilizers? Every time, Kiro beamed. Just like you said. Check them twice, fly once. Adrian looked at his family. The pack, the unit. His wristcom buzzed. It was a priority alert from the Security Control Center. Commander Cole, we have an incoming transport. Unregistered transponder. Life signs are erratic. They are hailing on a distress frequency. They say they are escaping the mines on Belt 4. Adrian looked at the message. He looked at Nira. She saw the alert on his face. She didn't tell him to stay. She didn't tell him it was dangerous. She walked over to the closet and pulled out his jacket, the new one, with the Peacekeeper insignia on the shoulder. Go, she said. They need a table. Adrian took the jacket. He kissed her forehead. I'll be back for dinner, he promised. Bring guests, Sori shouted from the chair. We have extra soup. Adrian stepped out into the corridor. He walked with a spring in his step. The universe was cold and dark and full of people like Helena Morrow. But as long as there were people willing to make the table bigger, willing to answer the text and sit down with the lonely, there was hope. Adrian Cole, the human, of the Fox Pack, headed towards the hangar bay. He had a job to do, and he wasn't eating alone ever again.